Hey, gang. Just thought that we would go in kind of as promised and do a technically this is a deep dive, but there are some surprises up here in the roadmap roundup. So we might be doing another one of these in a couple weeks, but I said that I'd be doing a deep dive, so we'll do a deep dive. We'll get to that when we get further into this, but let's go ahead and take a roadmap. Let's get this. All right, so here we go. So if you've never seen one of these before, this is one of my deep dives. I do deep dives and shallow dives into the progress tracker, which is this guy right here. And basically what I do is I talk about what's being worked on, how far along it is, expectations for what it is, how long it'll really go, what's happening with the production scheduling, all of that. And before I do that, I kind of go through both the release view and the roadmap roundup, which is what we're going to do now. I have timestamps in the down below parts. I always start with a caveat around now, and that is that the progress tracker is measuring sprints. So even though something is 100% done and has been 100% done for a month, 2 months, a year, unless you're seeing it in the game, and sometimes even then it does not mean that work is done. It just means that the planned sprints for that deliverable have been completed. It does not mean that there aren't going to be more planned sprints in the future. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get into this. So we'll go ahead and start with the roadmap roundup. I don't think this will be a very long one today. We'll get to that in a second, man. About right there. Roadmap roundup for February 8th, 2023, 1 p.m. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Every 2 weeks, we accompany the roadmap update with a brief explanatory note to give you insight into the decision-making that led to any changes. This is part of an effort to make our communication more transparent, more specific, and more insightful for all of you who help us make Squadron 42 and Star Citizen possible. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into this week's roadmap roundup. CIG community. That's usually pretty standard. Sometimes they'll switch up the language a little bit. I always read it just in case they hide something in there. They haven't for about a year. Notable changes for February 8th, 2023. And this is where the meat usually is. And sure enough, right here in this paragraph, there's a lot. Alpha 319. The upcoming release of Alpha 318 brings important advancements to the technology behind Star Citizen. The highlight of this update is persistent entity streaming, which represents a monumental effort for our engineering teams. We are eager to share this update with more players soon and are thrilled about the improvements it will bring. Again, note that this is Alpha 319 and they're talking about Alpha 318 here. To ensure server and client stability in Alpha 318, both before and after launch, our team has decided to extend the 318 branch for an extra patch cycle. This will allow us to address any issues that may arise. As a result, the next update following the release of Alpha 318 will come before Invictus launch week and will feature a variety of new and exciting content you can read about below. Although this update will be designated Alpha 319, it will be built upon the Alpha 318 code base, which is kind of weird because all of their branches are built on the previous branches. Otherwise, they'd start over from zero. Our production teams are currently evaluating the feasibility of integrating originally planned 319 content into the Alpha 318 branch. And that's because 318 has gone on so long. This was kind of one of those things a couple months back, or I guess like a month back, November, December-ish, I was kind of speculating that if 318 was waiting longer and longer to launch, that they might start dragging in some of the things that were just wrapping in like December. But then it sort of seemed like they made 318 feature complete, or feature locked rather. And it sounded like they weren't going to be adding anything more. Now it sounds like they're going to be rolling 318. When they say rolling it another cycle, that means that they're going to roll like 318 to 318.3 or whatever up until around June, which was originally what I thought. I always kind of thought that 318 was going to drop in March just based on how complicated server meshing and all of this tech is that they're bringing in. I thought that March was reasonable for 318 to drop, and that 319 would be like a June batch. Kind of sounds like that's what's going to happen here. And that's sort of what they're saying here. The items we are adding to the release view today are subject to change and additions, which they always add more things, but typically they won't put something on the release view unless they're pretty sure they're going to knock it out. They didn't used to be that way, but like the last couple patches, basically what lands on the release view, it's about a 99% chance that it's going to be on there. It usually doesn't drop off. It did not used to be the case. Nonetheless, we wanted to share our tentative goals as of now, with potentially more updates, changes, additions coming in roadmap updates ahead. We're definitely going to be getting more changes, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Release view. The following cards have been added to the Alpha 319 column on release view. And Alpha 319 has always been a bit of a mystery. We've been waiting for almost a year since they mentioned that 319 was even going to be a thing, because we thought it was going to be 318 and then 4.0 was the original plan. And then they kind of threw in maybe 319 December patch, and we were all like, what's that? And so we were kind of thinking it would be a smaller thing. As 318 stretched out and out and out, it became obvious that 319 was going to kind of be a bridge patch between 318 and 4.0, hopefully. We'll see. We might have 320 or 321 at this rate. I don't know. So these are the cards that they've added to the release view, which we'll get to in a second. Lorville Seascape, reworking the Lorville skyline to better fit the scale of the city and its distinctive buildings. And I think they just talked about that last Friday, but there was also a good talk about it at CitizenCon, if you want to watch that. New player experience, an initiative for improving the initial first 30-minute gameplay experience, which will help players understand the context of the world and introduce them to some of Star Citizen's basic features. The update focuses on the experience in Area 18 and Bikini Point. So that's interesting because they're going to be doing a rework on Area 18. Normally I don't go into this much detail, but it's a deep dive, so here we are, diving deep. This is interesting on 2 points. One, they're centering around Area 18, which they've talked several times that Area 18 is problematic for them, and they need to do an update on it, but they're not quite sure how they're going to do the tech for it yet. So starting a new player experience on a place that you know is going to need work is an interesting choice. I would have had it at Lorville, would have been the obvious choice. Plus Lorville has better connectivity through the city. But anyway, new player experience is a good sign on the second point, because it kind of means that they're pretty happy with the general mechanics of like how you move around and how you interact with things. They're not thinking that's going to change a whole lot, because you don't put a new player experience like a tutorial of how to do the game when everything's going to be constantly changing. And that's essentially what we've had for the last 10 years. So the fact that they're doing this now is actually kind of heartening. Moving on, new missions, salvage contracts. So this is something, if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you know that these kinds of contracts are things that I have kind of said Star Citizen needs for a long time. It would be better if you would allow things like the Terrapin, the Carrack, the Aquila, the MSR go out and be able to find wrecks and then create a beacon, and then somebody could buy that beacon and do it this way. But they're essentially doing it with an NPC as opposed to a player. I think they should have implemented it with a player, because they've already got the beacon system. They've got ways of paying people in game. Just have it be, you basically create a mission where somebody pays you to get the claim. With more civilian access to salvage ships, contract brokers are offering salvage jobs for derelicts around Lagrange points around Stanton. These brokers charge a fee for their services, so this will require some buy-in, but the contractors are free to keep any salvage material for resale. So basically what will happen is there's going to be 3 different kinds of missions. So the way they'll pretty much all work is you'll get a mission pop up. It'll be like, pay me $5,000 and you get the salvage that's here. And then when you go to that location, there's going to be more than that much in salvage available. And so the 3 missions are the lawful one, where you go to an area and it's protected by turrets or something like that. So if you do the claim jumpers mission, where you're either knocking claim jumpers out or you're helping them out, you're knocking out the lawful claim holders. Same thing. You'll probably have those turrets around. Hopefully they're a little more effective than they are now. That's the lawful one. Then there'll be another one where it's just kind of a free for all. Anyone that can see the mission can take it. And so you might have 2 or 3 salvagers show up at once, create conflict. And then there's going to be the unlawful version, where I'm assuming if a lawful one pops up, there'll be an unlawful one on the flip side. They'll say, hey, there's a claim here, we want you to go and take it. So there might be a player there thinking they're safe in the lawful one, and unlawful players will come in, which, given the griping people have been giving about PvP being griefers, I don't think that'll help that. I think CIG kind of needs to have another kind of discussion about the fact that it's more like Eve, in the sense that when you leave the station, you're essentially agreeing to PvP, even if you're not a PvP player. Case in point, new missions, Ghost Hollow PvP mission. Notice that says PvP and not PvE. So player versus player, not player versus environment or entities. Adding a new mission type to Ghost Hollow point of interest and stand system. Making use of the comm array as well as AI nav mesh, this mission type will create PvP encounters where the players will need to fight for control over terminals for a chance at big credit payouts. So kind of sounds like almost capture the flag. Interesting. Progress tracker. So this is the part where it kind of cuts deep into my soul and what I do here, but this is it. Due to some format changes to the data we use for the progress tracker, our update for both upstream and downstream teams in 2023 needs a bit more time to get sorted. You can expect these updates to come in subsequent publishes. So that's why I'm saying that this one is a deep dive, but it's not really a deep dive because they haven't really updated the progress tracker to the point where they're going to have it. So I'm mostly going to talk about the things that are going to be worked on in the new year. But keep in mind, in the next 2 to 4 weeks, all of that could be changing as they put in the teams and the new schedules and everything, from the sounds of this. So that's it for the roadmap roundup. I had a lot to say there. I'm not going to say as much on the next sections, just because we don't really know what's going to be happening with the progress tracker, but I'll still talk about the things that are going to get worked on in the new year. But with that said, let's go on to the release view. So the release view, this used to be, if you click on this button over here, show previous releases, those used to be nightmare fuel. It would be one of those things where cards would be on there right up until like a month before release, and then they'd just drop half of them, and you'd be like, what are you doing? I was waiting specifically for that thing. But basically, I think since 3.16, these have been pretty accurate. Like they'll go for less is more, and it's a much more community friendly way to do it. Like they don't put things on here unless they're almost positive, and this is something that Aaron Roberts talked about, I think back in 2019, that they wanted to change the roadmap to moving to more a system where it was accurate. Like only put the cards on there that you know you're going to have on that patch, And then as you get closer and closer to the patch, you can be like, okay, we're finishing this task on time. There's no big, huge surprises or blockers. That one can go on there too. So as opposed to having a list like this and taking 5 things off of it with a month to go, you start with a list like this and add to it. That's much easier politically with the way this community freaks out over things. So 318, apparently from what they're saying, we might be getting more cards on this. So in 2 weeks, they might add a couple tentative cards to this just to kind of, since we're probably going to be getting a couple, from the sounds of it, probably a couple 318 branches before we get 319, which isn't shocking. But for right now, 319, this is the first time we've seen what we're getting in 319. So as far as my speculations go, I was thinking that 319 or maybe 320, depending on what we sneak in there before 4.0, would be a soft engineering patch. And I'll get to that in the progress tracker, why I think that is. A soft engineering patch and a UI patch. So we're going to get a lot of UI and control improvements, like the EVA. Like the new EVA they had, where he is moving more like Iron Man rather than sitting straight up and just rocking all over the place. Our EVA system in this game sucks. It is really bad, but the new one looks amazing. So you'll get that. You'll get the improved prone. I want to say that there's new stair navigation in there that they wrapped a few months ago. That might go in there too. But soft engineering patch with like the basics of engineering, like tier 0 for multi-crew gameplay, and better UI. That's what I expect for 319. None of that is on here, but I still expect it, especially with them saying tentative Q2, which is a June, July release. I would be shocked if we don't get at least a couple of those pieces in here, and we'll get to that in the next part. Lorville Sayscape, so they're rolling along on this one pretty fast. It looks pretty good. One thing that kind of makes me question this, although if it's Q2, it should be good. It kind of seems like building interiors, which I think we're going to hear about tomorrow, either tomorrow or Friday. I think they are part of the Lorville Sayscape, so even though the basic landing zone itself will be finished, the actual full intensity Sayscape won't be, because they wanted to do those building interiors. So that might be 319.1 or 319.2 if they're moving slow. I don't know, could be. We'll take a look at that in a second too. So gameplay, new player experience, that's what they're talking about over in the roadmap roundup. New mission salvage contracts, Ghost Hollow PvP missions. So again, 4 cards, nothing too surprising. Not all of them have a one-to-one analogy on the progress tracker. Sometimes you have to read between the lines, but Lorville Sayscape, new player experience, both of those are on there. Salvage contracts and Ghost Hollow PvP, those are kind of probably buried in encounters or something like that, would be my guess. But with that said, that's pretty much it for the release view. Just actually seeing 319 on there is kind of a coup on its own. So with that said, let's go on to the progress tracker. So I've pre-gamed this and I've opened up only the things that are happening in the new year, in this year, and things that are wrapping right now. The way I like to set this thing up is put it on deliverables. It defaults to teams, which if I were them, if CIG is watching, I would flip those two, because more people are interested in what's being made than who is making it, because especially if you're new to the project or you're a casual observer of the project, it's not clear what the difference between like the actor feature team is and the actor tech team are, and that kind of thing. And so it maybe flip those two. Teams is always a good one to look at if you're wondering why this deliverable isn't coming until the end of the year. Usually if you look at the teams, you'll see that that particular team is working on 80 different things. It's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But here we go. So Again, I've pre-gamed this. Again, I'm going to kind of touch on the caveat that even though something is 100% done, like Asiato Station, wrapped back in, guess that'd be November, like the end of November, that doesn't mean that they're not going to come back to it later and start polishing it again. So just because something is 100% complete and even released does not mean that they're not going to come back to it later and work on it. With that said, let's get going. Actor status tier 2. So this is another one of those things that kind of goes along with my theory that we're going to be getting a lot of cool, not just UI, but kind of character mechanics. This one is, let's see, actor status tier 2 looks at a variety of new elements, such as hygiene, NPC status tracking, multiple bites, DNA integrity, medical insurance, cybernetic limbs, and cloning. So there's some really cool stuff in there. And this is one of the things that I want to point out is that if something is a Squadron 42 asset as well as a PU asset, it's going to be prioritized. We may not get it super quick because they'll run it into Squadron 42 first, but we'll get it sooner than later because they're trying to get Squadron 42 out the door. So if you see something that's dual, it means we're probably, it's not going to shift around a whole lot, whereas something that's just PU might shift around. But this one, work hasn't begun, so wait a couple weeks and we'll see what actually happens here. But for right now, actor status tier 2, something that might be coming in the new year. Aerodynamic control surfaces, in theory, they're only a couple weeks out, which would make sense. They've kind of been talking about this one a lot. Vehicle feature team is the only one working on this right now. I'd be shocked if this one didn't stretch out another couple weeks, but this should be an easy win for 319, I would guess. If not one of those features that they try to drag into 318, this would be a good candidate for that. Like, we finished aerodynamic control surfaces, now you get that in 318.1. This would be a good candidate. All of this other stuff, if you just see me scroll by it, it was stuff that was finished last year. Posen Tokai, this is the Jian fighter. Think of it as roughly the equivalent of the Saber. 4 guns, really maneuverable, like all Jian ships are. I believe it is at about the halfway mark. This is the content team. They are actually building it. But note there's no downstream teams on this. And since this is the first real Jian ship, and yes, I know the Car2 all exists, but this is the first Jian ship they built in 7 or 8 years. So they're going to nail down the UI, and they're going to basically kind of do what they did with the Banu Defender. They're going to really kind of lock in the Jian style guide on the inside, because this is really the first Jian ship that we've had since they've implemented the new pipeline for ships. They say June here. It's not a gigantic ship, but 25 weeks is pretty fast. And again, there's no downstream teams. Expect this one more. Think of this more as like a CitizenCon release or like a September release. Makes sense. Still working on it, about halfway. It's about right. The Argo SRV. So this one's interesting because it's waiting on tractor beams. This is sort of the tugboat with the 3 big tractor beams on it. 45 weeks is a pretty good sprint. No downstream teams on it yet, but they've got a pretty solid handle on the Argo style guide. So this one should actually come along pretty quick. I would imagine it'll stretch a couple weeks. They won't be dropping it until they finish tractor beams, though. So even though, consider this kind of in the same category as the Mystical C, in the sense that they'll just kind of keep polishing it and working on it, but they're not going to drop it in until the game has the mechanics to handle it. And while the ship might be done, the mechanics underlying it, those big tractor beams, aren't in yet. So maybe a 319 asset. I could see them doing that. Artificial gravity, there's another thing that would make sense for a soft engineering patch. And I believe, yeah, right now this wraps around June. Again, this will be another one that we'll kind of have to see what happens in a couple weeks or 4 weeks. Just sort of see what teams come on and what teams go. But this is actually the PU team, which is the sort of engineering team. So engineering in the sense of programmers, not engineering in the sense of end-game engineering on a ship. Just saying. So artificial gravity, maybe a 319.2 or something, but I would expect artificial gravity to kind of drop near the end of the year, or like September. The September patch might be the soft engineering patch. Again, we'll know more in a couple of weeks. And you're going to hear me say that a lot, because right now it sort of seems like these are mostly just information that we had last year, just with the new timeline. Basically this little dotted line moved, and I think that that's the only real difference. Asteroid facility, so this one's kind of a cool one. Basically bunker missions, but they're an asteroid, so you might have the added element of 0G, which I wouldn't want that before the new EVA came in. This one stretched out a little bit, I believe. I think it was originally ending in March or so, which would be out here. Now it's technically ending in June, which I think you'll see a lot of things are ending in June, which I'm thinking that's actually the part that they haven't updated. Essentially what that means is we've scheduled this team out to June, not necessarily they're going to finish their work in June. So another little thing that I think will change in a couple weeks is you're going to see a lot of these bars start to stretch out, because that's using last year's planning numbers. Okay, Bounty Hunter V2. So this is kind of a cool one. So Bounty Hunter, obviously a game loop that is in the game right now, but it's very basic. This is the part that is going to, right now you basically get a contract and you end up with like a god beacon over someone's head that you can zero in. Like if somebody is hiding out in Korea, as you go into Korea, you can tell they are hidden around that corner right there and they're ducking down, and I can see that, and they can't see you, and you just pop around the corner and blow them away. It's easy town. About the only time it's hard is when somebody's actually in another ship, and then you're actually having to fight them one-on-one, or however many you got. But this is going to change things. So you're going to get a mobiGlas security app linked to a distress beacon. So basically you're going to get a notification that somebody has committed a crime. They've assaulted someone, they've broken in somewhere, they've stolen something like that. And so the bounty hunter will say, okay, now I have to go and catch that person. Of course, by the time you actually show up to the location, even if it's nearby, that person probably isn't there anymore. And so now you're going to kind of play a waiting and hunting game, hence bounty hunter. You're going to kind of have, you'll get like a ping, and it'll be like, oh, they just passed this ComSat over here. They just landed at this landing zone, like this lawful landing zone. And you'll just start zeroing in on them as they move through the system. And other bounty hunters might be doing the same, just kind of closing the distance with them until you get to them. Much cooler way to do it. You might be able to, well, actually, let's just read through this. This is a deep dive. We can do that. Enabling players to track criminals via the mobiGlas security app. There you go. Linked to distress beacons, comm arrays, air traffic control systems, cameras, which is interesting, and NPC informants. Those last two are kind of interesting. This will rely on various new back-end tech, including virtual AI, the NPC scheduler, and security service. Security service is further down. NPC scheduler, I think, was wrapped last year, but again, that doesn't mean they're not going to do more work on it. Virtual AI is Quanta, which is still in process. They're saying around Q2. That sounds about right. This is a 69-week sprint. Nice. So that seems reasonable for that level of game loop. The only thing that would stall this out is those other sort of tied in back end techs like the SRV. It's not going to drop until the virtual AI, the NPC scheduler, which I think the NPC scheduler is done, and security service, which I think security service is done too. So it's really Tony Z's Quanta, which is probably holding this up. Although I'm assuming the NPC scheduler and security service have got to be then tied into Quanta. So it's going to take a little while. June 319, Bounty Hunter V2. I could see that being a Bounty Hunter patch too. Building interiors. So this is the one for Lorville that I was saying. I would be shocked if they dropped Lorville without building interiors. And right now it's due to drop in July, basically. So are they going to delay Lorville for the building interiors, or are they just going to release building interiors in a sub branch like 319.1? My bet is for the latter. I'm betting that they release Lorville as is, let's get used to the new Lorville, then introduce building interiors, which I think we're going to be seeing tomorrow on Inside Star Citizen. We'll see. But building interiors, we haven't seen them yet. Looks like it's going to be cool. It will greatly expand the play areas that we have in the verse. Cave archetypes, they just released sand caves in 318, or will release it in 318 once we get it. We're also going to be getting ice caves and rock caves. Basically, the caves that we have right now are rock caves, but they're the first iteration. Now they're going to come through and use all of the tech that they used to create the sand caves. They're going to do it again, which is good, because with those rock caves, if you've ever been in them, not as bad as it used to be, but easy to get stuck, easy to kind of hit a point where you might fall through the earth. It's not all of the connectivity is 100% spot on, so you might go down somewhere that's accessible, and then you try to get back up, and the way to get back up is actually blocked, so you're just trapped down there, which isn't good gameplay. Moving on down, Squadron 42. So the thing that I was kind of running on for most of last year was that, or I guess like the second half of last year, was that December was kind of a go, no-go month for Squadron 42 to move to beta. And I have a whole thing. I'll put a link in the up above part for what I mean when I say beta, so I don't have to reiterate it here. But basically that they just kind of feature locked Squadron 42. This is one I fully expect these chapters to just keep jumping out and undergoing polishing and polishing and polishing until the game goes gold. So my bet for Squadron 42 is that it'll be releasing in roughly 3 years. So what, 2026? I'm sure they'd love to hit 2025 because it's a cool round number, but I'm thinking probably 2026. So expect these lines for anything that's a Squadron 42 asset like this, like these chapters, to be polishing right up until they go gold, like actually start selling copies. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that so you can sort of see all the Squadron 42 assets ended around December. So moving on, we got the Crusader Spirit, which is a roughly freelancer size Crusader ship. So kind of think of it as a starter plus size ship. There's 3 different versions. There's the cargo version, which is the C1. There's the bomber version, which carries, I think, 8 size 5 bombs. That's the A1. And then there is the, what I think is the interesting one, is a passenger carrier, the E1. And they're not going to implement that until the sort of executive part up top can break away as a life raft, which would mean that they'd have to get life rafts working, which is kind of cool. So watch the Crusader Spirit. Again, downstream teams aren't in this yet. The Crusader style guide, a lot like Argo, is pretty well they have a pretty good handle on it by now, so I expect this one to kick along a little bit faster with the downstream teams than normal. So this isn't completely unreasonable around June. The only thing would be the extra tech for the E1. So I would guess if we do get this around June, we'd probably get the cargo variant and the bomber variant, and then the E1 would probably drop the next available patch, like next available big number patch, maybe small number patch depending on how long 319 draws out, or if we get 320, something like that. I wouldn't be shocked. Cutting tier 2, so this is cutting with your multi-tool, which they've been showing off for years, but I think it's more linking it up to not the actual multi-tool itself having that feature, but having the things that it can cut correctly labeled so that when you hit it with the laser, it actually cuts it and then reacts correctly. So if you cut a grate, the grate will fall over as opposed to being locked in place, that kind of thing. Or if you cut the lock on a cargo container, you can open that cargo container. I don't think it'll be... This is the part that I'm not sure about. This will primarily include the ability to free form cut on specific surfaces. So depending on how much weight you give free form, I mean, could you cut a cartoon shape out of whatever these specific surfaces are? But those specific surfaces, because you're cutting it, you're increasing the geometry of that object. You're not going to be able to cut everything in the verse. But that's kind of critical for salvaging. So it's got to be able to cut some stuff. But we'll see. They'll be talking more about that. Again, it's one of those that's scheduled out to June, which means we'll get more information in a couple weeks. 40-week sprint, so not quite a year. I would expect this one to stretch out a little bit more. Would be key for an engineering game loop too, and a salvage game loop. Disarray ammunition. We're getting a bunch of weird ammunition types in the new year. Curious what will happen in a couple weeks if these will stay on there, because they've got like Disarray, Inferno, like fire ones. I want to say there's one more. Probably some sort of distortion one too. It's a 5-week sprint. One of the things I like to talk about on this show is anytime something is planned this far out, don't count on it. Like, don't say, oh man, I can't wait until July when I can get my disarray ammunition, because this is just kind of the team say, I guess I can work on that in a year, and then they get nailed down with other things take priority. Don't count on that. It's kind of cool that they want to be working on disarray ammunition, but the actual timeline at this point is aspirational. It's not necessarily what will happen. And I'll kind of get to the same thing on distortion propagation. This is going to be kind of key, I would assume, for the bounty hunter gameplay, especially, but also pirates would really do this. Distortion is kind of in a weird place and has been for probably about four years or so, and 5 years ago it was kind of overpowered. Like you could still shut down a ship with distortion weapons now, but they haven't quite settled on how they want these things to work. That's what this is settling on that. But what I wanted to talk about was you can sort of see this gap right here between the teams. Anytime that happens, a big gap like that, this team is definitely going to be still working on it. The vehicle feature team is going to definitely still be working on it. But the weapon feature team, which is greatly overloaded, maybe not. This is like almost a quarter away from where we are right now. And the weapon feature team might be pulled onto something else. The only reason that might not be the case is because this is a Squadron 42 asset. Which means it'll be prioritized. Moving on, dynamic events. This is what I was talking about with this over here with the salvage contracts in the Ghost Hollow. Dynamic events are a little bit different. That's more like Xenothreat or Siege of Orison. That's more a dynamic event, but like dynamic mission system down here, you'll see that jump out since they're going to constantly be adding these dynamic events. Even though it again wraps in June, they're going to be making new dynamic events clear up to gold and beyond. So just kind of expect that one to keep going, but still working on it. Flak ammunition, that's the one that I forgot. So again, notice that you've got this bar up here, but there's no teams. So the last time a team worked on it was the weapon content team down here, or weapon concept? Content. No, it is content. They had a short sprint back here, and then a huge gap up to here for the weapon feature team. Again, weapon feature team to take over. Flak ammunition is cool. Will allow you to just kind of blow out a bunch of flak or shrapnel and stuff for smaller, like big ships will have these flak guns, and it will basically area denial for light fighters. Light fighters will have to bug out or be destroyed by this flak. Is it a priority for CIG? It's not a Squadron 42 asset, so which is sort of surprising. So it kind of depends on what they're rolling out around this time. I would guess this one will probably get bumped. I wouldn't be surprised if all the special ammunition types get bumped, but moving on. Freight elevators, this is a very cool one. If you're a cargo runner, this is basically cargo running tier 2. Freight elevators are tied to that. Essentially what you'll do is you will, right now you go to a kiosk and you say, I want to buy 40 SEU of Laranite. You hit the buy button, you go down to your ship, and there's 40 SEU of Laranite in your ship. It's automatically loaded. You don't have to think about getting your ship and go. What will happen with the freight elevators is you'll order that, and it'll say is being delivered to your hangar. And so this is tied to persistent hangars, which we'll get to later. And then what will happen is once it's there, you will have to go get that cargo and load it onto your ship manually. I will assume what they're going to do is have an option for you to pay the station or the location to load your ship, and it'll effectively just it'll be kind of like reclaiming your ship now, where you can't touch your ship until the timer goes down. It'll be the same thing where they're loading your ship off site, so you don't have access to your ship, and you wait 2 hours and your ship is loaded for you. Or you can do it yourself, and you might be able to do it in 30 minutes, or you might be able to do it in 10 minutes if you have a couple friends. But freight elevators, first part of that. So moving on, you can see there's a lot of things here they finished in the last year. Incendiary ammunition. I think this one was actually, no. This one's coming up later. Yeah. So you can see they have the weapon feature team working on a lot of things around June, July. Don't count on that staying the case. That was something that they decided back here like a year ago. And what do you feel like you'll be able to do in a year and a half? Well, I think I'll be able to work on it next June. That's what this is. So a couple weeks, we'll see what actually happens with these. If there's something that's going to move, it's going to be these. Jump points. I always like to say that jump points are the best indicator of when they think 4.0 will drop. It is a Squadron 42 asset also, which means it's prioritized. Obviously, they're trying to get 4.0 to us. But when you see this one actually wrap, it means they think that they'll be able to get 4.0 out relatively shortly after. Again, ends around June. Don't expect that to actually end around June, but they want jump points to be really impressive and cool and inviting and immersive. So that's kind of their legendary thing right here, is to go through those jump points and arrive in a new system. So they really want that whole event to just sort of be mind-blowing and cool, so that you want to travel to other systems. But anyway, jump points, the best indicator of 4.0 in my opinion. When you see them start wrapping up jump points, it's all like, well, okay, we're getting close, so we better nail this down. This looks good enough. We can do polishing on it after the point, but let's get this out to them so that they can get to pyro. That's one of the ones I look for. Life support was one of my indicators for why I thought 319 would be a soft engineering patch. It wraps in June, so again, we'll see in a couple of weeks where it lands. But if that one stays at June, you can see it's been going 114 weeks. That seems about right. That's a little over 2 years of dev time. They have about, I'd say, 48 to 50 weeks in a year that they actually work on these sprints. So yeah, you're looking at like a year and a quarter of dev time there to hit this mark. I would still say this would be a pretty good ad for 319 if it stays on target. But again, we'll know in a couple weeks. Lockable containers, that could be one that sneaks into 318 1 or 2, since they're going to have another branch on it. This one seems like it should be pretty easy. About the only thing that I think this would be waiting on is hacking. And hacking was wrapped last year. Again, you might see that one stretch out in a couple weeks. But lockable containers doesn't strike me as something that would be extremely difficult to pull off. 73 weeks seems excessive. So I'm wondering if that is kind of rolled up in some sort of the mechanics involved with it. I don't know. It would be interesting to kind of went back and said why lockable containers, which seems pretty straightforward, ran for like a year and a half. I'd be curious about that one. I want to know what rope physics are going to be used for. I assume climbing and exploring, but we'll find out. They said that they wanted it to work with a pulley system. Lorville Seascape, we know we're getting this one for 319. We're like 99% sure. So this is about when they feel those things are going to start rolling in. Obviously, if 319 isn't dropping until June, they'll probably polish this a bit more. So expect this one to stretch out in a couple weeks. But the fact that Jared even said that they were moving along faster on Lorville Seascape than they thought they would. Again, building interiors, I would assume they would want to work into the Lorville Seascape, but you can see Lorville Seascape is well ahead of the building interiors. So they could conceivably drop Lorville Seascape and then drop the building interiors either in a sub patch or the next available big patch, like 320. MFD rework. So this was another one of those I kind of have tagged for 319 being a UI patch, was the MFD rework, your visor and your HUD, the aerodynamic control surfaces, not really UI, but how your ship is controlled and works in flight. I'm assuming it's going to come with UI updates. EMFD rework was one of the ones that I really had tagged. New Moby Glass is another one, which I think is down a little bit. We'll get there. Again, wrapping in June, so we'll know in a couple weeks what's going on with it. And I'll probably do another deep dive then. Mystical Sea. This one isn't coming until that next tier of cargo running comes. And maybe not even then, because the Mystical Sea is enormous. The amount of cargo it carries, I think it carries 3 to 4 times the cargo that the C2 does. And if you've ever tried to fill up your C2, it's hard. Like, you got to stop at 3 or 4 different places to fill the thing up, or at least 2 different places to fill it up with any goods. So the economy has to be able to handle the whole sea, both in its ability to buy cargo, but also in to sell it. And I am sure they would like to have Quanta working before then, so that the economy is actually dynamic and working the way it's supposed to, so that when you buy a bunch of stuff from here, there's a deficit of that thing and the price goes up. And then when you sell it over here, there's a big surplus and the price goes down over here. So it creates market fluctuations that have people running cargo everywhere. The other thing is that the Mystical Sea can't land on the ground. So the stations are literally going to have to start doing heavy lifting and becoming centers of commerce, where smaller ships that are able to navigate atmospheres will be trading from the big station where the whole seas are coming in down to the ground, like from Virginia to Area 18. Smaller ships can make that run all day and basically deplete the resources or deplete the supply on the station to the planet that needs it, and carrying goods back up so that the whole sea can come and pick up those goods and pull them away. That's what they need to implement before the whole sea comes in. And as far as we can tell, that's a little ways off. That might not drop until 4.0. So even though the whole sea wraps in a couple weeks, don't expect to see the whole sea prior to us getting that next tier of cargo running and Quanta actually working in the game the way Tony Z stressed, I believe, in 2019. Yeah, I think it was the last time that we had an in-person CitizenCon was when he talked about it. I think he had another one like the following year in the virtual one for 2020. Moving on down, Mop and Bucket. I always like to point out this one. So this one's actor feature team, and it kind of seems like a goofy one. It's just for Squadron 42, but obviously all the AI is going to be able to use this. This is the AI Janders being able to use multiple tools in either hand. It's not just a Mop and Bucket. It's the AI being able to use two tools at once, make decisions with them, like, oh, I need to use this tool for this and this tool for that, and do it in a way that feels real. Very, very cool kind of base work there by the actor feature team. And again, wraps around June. We'll see what happens. It's a Squadron 42 asset, but we'd almost certainly see that in the PU. It's not just Mop and Bucket. It's just they're kind of hiding. They're hiding a very cool feature with a very mundane name. Moving on down, new interdiction scenarios. I've been saying for a while, I think that this one's going to come with space mines, but more than space mines, it's going to have basically, we used to have a lot more of these where they had to tone it down just because it was annoying. You couldn't jump between Daymar and Yalo without getting interdicted 3 times. You'd just be like, come on. And jumping across the system was ridiculous. You get interdicted 2 or 3 times. It's just like, okay, this isn't fun. Like, I just want to trade my cargo. I can only game for about 45 minutes, and this is chewed up 35 of it. So thanks. I guess I'm logging now. They dialed it way back, but if they can make those interdiction scenarios, they're going to also utilize Quanta. So this should kind of give you an idea in a couple weeks. Again, note that's June. This will give you a good idea of when they think Quanta will be coming. That doesn't mean that we won't be getting some new interdiction along the ways. This could be one that they release in modules. Like this time we're going to release the minefield interdiction scenario, and now we're going to introduce the gigantic comet that's in your way, and you got to avoid the comet, and this one is the pirates or whatever. So they can introduce that one in modules. Just because this stretches out doesn't mean they're going to drop 20 interdiction scenarios on us whenever this thing finishes. They could do like one here, one here, one here, one here, and through the patch as they get it done. New player experience. This is the one that we're getting in 319. Looks pretty good. 37 weeks, pretty reasonable sprint. This is good. It teaches new players how to do it. If you've ever jumped in the game, which if you're here, I hope you have. If not, jump on into the verse and use my code right over there in that section, because I need free stuff. And you get free stuff, but it's mostly about me. Anyway, new player experience. If you ever seen new players in chat, they're all like, how the hell do I get out of my bed? Where do I go? Where's my ship? How do I get my ship? Do I need armor? Where do I get armor? Where do I get things? And this kind of will walk them through that. And that is a good thing. It's kind of nice to shepherd new players through the game. I like doing that, but there are times when I don't, and somebody just up and pops them immediately before they know what they're doing, and that's not a very good experience. Origin X1. So this is a space bike. I always kind of like to talk about this one. This one's usually my example on big gaps. So you can see there's almost half a year in between these two teams working on, although to their credit, they had a huge gap in between these two teams, basically the EU content team and the US content team, and they stayed on target. Like, I felt sure that this was going to get dumped. So US team, looking at you, see if you can keep this thing on target. It's a space bike. It's a really small thing. My theory is that they're waiting on the 600i, even though the 600i, so this is a good example of when I say something wrapped. You can see the 600i wrapped all the way back here in Q1, and this is the rework of the 600i. If you've been following this thing at all, you know it didn't wrap. We don't have the new 600i yet. So this is one that in a couple weeks or so, we're going to see where it is in production. They're probably not going to drop the X1. It would just make sense to drop both of those at once. So drop the X1 with the rework of the 600i. Just makes sense. But again, this team is just wrapping up their work. Which team is that? Vehicle feature team, and then the US vehicle content team takes up over here. Once they actually start working on it, it shouldn't take very long. Origin's pretty well nailed down. It's a bike. It's small. It's a small bike. It's like Nox sized. Might even be a little bit smaller than the Nox. Fits on the 400i. That's kind of cool. But yeah, it's those big gaps, never trust them. Just kind of assume the X1 is something on their radar and they're gonna finish it. Who knows when? Outpost Homestead, Independent and Outlaw, again, a pyro asset, so they're just going to polish this thing and polish this thing and polish this thing until 4.0 is ready to drop. So even though, again, ends in June, it's not really ending in June. But it is kind of like jump points. It'll be a good indicator that when this bar gets shorter and shorter and shorter and we pass it, probably means 4.0. They're feeling pretty confident about it. Persistent hangers, this is another thing that we'll need for the new cargo loop. So when this one wraps, you kind of know that we're getting ready for that tier 2 cargo, even though freight elevators are there. So this one is one of those that I'm going to be real curious about what happens in like 2 to 4 weeks. Because if that doesn't move, that's a really good sign that we get that new cargo gameplay and that they're confident about Quanta working and the dynamic economy actually working this year. Which it would be cool to get that before 4.0, since we're almost certainly getting 4.0 next year, would be my guess. 2024. Persistent streaming and server meshing. This one's going to keep being iterated on and iterated on and iterated on forever. So even though this wraps now, don't be scared if this one goes to the end of the year. It doesn't mean we're not getting server meshing. It just means that they're iterating on it. Physicalized weapon handling. Yeah, this is just when you're putting the scope on your gun. There's 2 ways you can do it. In your inventory screen, you can just drag and drop something onto your gun and it goes on it. Or you can pull the mag and strip it, which is another feature that's on here. I think wrapped. We'll see. If I see it on there, I'll point it out. I think it's one that wrapped though, so I might not have pre-gamed that. But in this case, when the other way you can do it is you're holding your gun and then you look at it and you can actually pop up a wheel and it'll say which scope you want to put on there, which barrel attachment, which underbarrel attachment, that kind of thing. Now when you say, okay, yeah, I want that scope as opposed to this scope, it'll actually pull off this scope and put it on. It'll be physicalized. So that's what they're talking about here. 7-week sprint, totally reasonable that would be the entirety of the sprint. That's not super complicated to do. And now that they have the weapon attachment volumes, which is something that they wrapped last year. Player interaction experience tier 0, hints and interactions. I'm sure that's going to be something that goes along with the new player experience. It's also a Squad 42 asset. This is one of those things that I think 319 will be a UI improvement, is player interaction experience tier 2, visor, HUD, and helmet. Builds on existing heads-up display, HUD, with a new look and feel. Includes a new equip and remove experience, so you'll be able to flip the helmet up and put it on your head, I guess. We've been waiting for that one. We had it back in the day, and then they kind of dephysicalized your screen. It used to kind of be that you'd get a view that's kind of like this when you're wearing a helmet, or if you had a heavy one, it'd almost be like this. You'd just be boxed in, which was immersive, but if you had an ultra wide, like 3/4 of your screen was unused, which don't wear heavy armor if you want to look around. But yeah, visor, HUD, and helmet, very, very cool. That's reasonable. 59 weeks, again, more than a year in dev time. So 319 could be a good UI if we don't get like a full-on engineering. UI and mobility, like climbing ladders, prone, EVA, all that kind of stuff could be coming in 319. We'll have to see in 2 weeks what happens to these, but it looks pretty good. EVA wrapped last year. We'll see if they're doing more work on it. Again, it looks like this isn't finalized, so maybe not. So prone tier 1. Again, mobility looks pretty good. 27 weeks seems reasonable. You'll basically just be able to look around when you're laying down. Pyro space stations. It's interesting. This one was 99 weeks, so like a 2-year sprint. They're wrapping pretty soon. Again, 2 weeks. We'll see if that stretches out. Pyro system plant mission setup. It seems like a lot of this sort of baseline pyro stuff is pretty much wrapped. They're just kind of polishing it, which makes sense since a lot of the things that are stalling pyro are on the back end, like server tech. Quantum simulation, this is what I was talking about, that this is Tony Z's baby. That is the dynamic economy, more or less. So it'll be real interesting a couple weeks if that one draws out. Quantum travel experience, see that that's getting there. Yeah, we'll see with this. I think that this will actually be shorter distances too, like actually like going from Yela to Daymar, you wouldn't lock onto Daymar and then do a jump. You just kind of move at this quantum travel speed at it. They kind of did something like that for I think it's an Inside Star Citizen a few weeks ago showed that off. I think that's related to this. Resource management, this is a big thing for engineering, the engineering game loop. Again, wraps in June, so in a couple weeks we'll see what's going on with that one. Resource management will probably be the biggest tell. Again, this is one that they could conceivably drop in modules. Like now you can control the air in your ship, and that's the toggles that you've got control of. And then it'll be now you can do air and power, and now you can do air and power and coolant and shields and all this other stuff, and you just kind of get it all. But they could drop it to us in modules. It's not like they would necessarily drop it all at once. They have options. RSI links, it's sort of the executive version of the Ursa. Should be wrapping pretty soon. That would not be a tough 319 asset. That'd be kind of a cool thing to drop on us. We do know that they're working on an unannounced vehicle. That's not the Lynx. The Lynx is something else. And they are actually, that one is straight to flyable or drivable. RSI Polaris, they, in theory, as of right now, they're going to be working on actually building the Polaris. This is not the concept team doing this, is the vehicle content team. So they are actually white boxing it and building it and making it. And absolutely no, it is not an 11-week sprint to create that ship. This thing is going to take 2 years, probably 2 years to make the RSI Polaris. So March of 2025, maybe, unless they really pick up the pace. It is a human ship. RSI has a pretty well established style guide, so maybe they bust it out in a year, but it's going to take a long time. The reason that I wanted to point out the Polaris is less that it's everybody's favorite ship, but lore wise, the Polaris was built as a militia ship after the events in Squadron 42. And so my theory on why they were going to build the Banu Merchantman before they built the Polaris was we knew there were Banu slavers in, it seems like most of your fights are against these people working with the Banu slavers. So it makes sense that there would be a Banu Merchantman in Squadron 42, but Polaris came after the events of Squadron 42. But if you look here, Squadron 42, so the Polaris is now a Squadron 42 asset. So they're going to retcon its lore and make it available in Squadron 42, which is real interesting. It also means they're going to fast track it, which might be why they dropped the Banu Merchantman and put the Polaris in. Be my guess. Vehicle munching. This is the next step for salvage. Cutting will be important for this because essentially what you're going to be doing is chopping up a ship. After you pull all its skin off, you're going to chop it into pieces and then suck those pieces either into the Vulture, which has a little tiny mouth, or the Reclaimer, which has an enormous one, and it'll just chew up all the raw materials of a ship. And then tier 3 will be, I assume, siphoning off gases and liquids there in the ship, and maybe tier 3 or 4 you'll be actually pulling components and anything you can grab out of the ship first. So it'll be kind of like a hard space shipbreaker where you pull out all the sort of really expensive micro parts first, and once you have all that done, then you start tearing the ship apart because you've got all the sort of fragile expensive stuff out of it. Vehicle munching, though, is going to be the next step, and you'll peel off the skin and then you'll eat the ship, and that'll be as far as it goes. And then the next tier, you'll start doing the components and liquids and the gases there on that ship. Quantanium. Seated item handling. So this is kind of cool. As the passenger of a vehicle, you can actually use a gun and defend it, whereas right now, if you're a passenger, you can kind of manipulate whatever screen is in front of you when you're driving around in a vehicle, but that's about it. I think the only vehicle right now where you can be a passenger and actually operate a weapon is the Dragonfly, a hand weapon, not a weapon that's integrated into the ship. Security Network V1. Full implementation of the security system includes other features for which players may need clearance level, such as doors and elevators. So that's going to be going hand in hand with hacking and stuff. Could also go along with engineering gameplay if they want to implement it on ships, which I feel is kind of a missing thing on ships right now. My org mates, I can't give them permission to be on my ship when I'm not there. So if right now, if I log out on my ship and they log out on my ship, even if I log on and then they log on, they're going to appear back at whatever station they were at last. they won't appear on my ship, where it should be, even if I don't log in, if I've given them the right permissions, they'll be able to log in and they'll spawn on my ship, whether I'm there or not. That is ideal, because at that point, orgs can start saying, okay, we have all of these org ships. You get the Carrack, you get the Polaris, you get the Perseus, you get the whole sea, and they can assign it to them. I think security network isn't tied up with that, but we need that. So there. That was something completely unrelated. Sliding. This is another mobility thing, but unfortunately this is one that's planned a little bit later. So this kind of throws a wrench in my idea that the mobility patch is going to be 3.19, unless they're just going to say you get EVA, prone, climbing ladders, and you get sliding in the next patch. You get that. You get all of that in 3.19, and then you get sliding in 3.19.1. Makes sense. Space mines, I'm thinking this is going to be our interdiction scenario at first. I wouldn't be shocked if the A1 or bombers like the Gladiator could actually carry small space mines. Some people were speculating that this meant that the Nautilus was coming. The Nautilus isn't one that'd sneak up on us. I do think that the Nautilus would make sense for a Squadron 42 asset, as with the Perseus, because lore-wise they're extremely old ships, but no, they've only got enough dev room to really work on one big ship at a time, and right now they're working on the Polaris. Squadron 42 vehicle support is the other thing that all the vehicle teams are working on, is just getting Squadron 42 up and running. This is their main focus. So if you're ever wondering why the EU vehicle content team, the US vehicle content team, and the vehicle feature team are busy, it's this deliverable right here. Swimming, tier 0, another mobility one. 14-week sprint, that seems about right for swimming. It's in other games, it's not super complex. I'm sure CR would like some immersive thing where you could get nitrogen narcosis or something, but who knows. Swimming and sliding might come in 3.19.1. Third person camera V2 for all the Tiradas out there. That's an interesting one myself, because I like taking pictures. Time trial missions. They say they're dropping it for 3.18. I think they're just dropping like the first version. Then they're going to drop another version for us. Apparently in 3.18.1 or something, we'll get more of them, would be my guess. I think they actually said that at some point, that they had a bunch of them that they're still working on. Kind of cool. Unannounced vehicles and stuff. Unannounced content in 23 weeks. A lot of these have been done for ages. I just kind of like to point them out. The really interesting ones, there's a vehicle concept that is run 67 weeks. The concept art, so making the JPEG for this thing, has taken 67 weeks. It's over a year. The MISC Odyssey, I think the Odyssey is the big one. The one that was the Carrack Killer took 55 weeks. So whatever this is, it's either bigger, more complicated, could be alien, because it could be an unknown manufacturer, but whatever it is a either very large or very complicated ship that they're trying to dial in the style guide for. So I mean, it's probably not going to be, I don't know, like they pick a name out of the hat. It's probably not going to be a Crusader C3 or something like that. It's going to be something big and weird. Think something like the Pioneer, where it's a very complicated concept. 37 weeks for an unannounced vehicle. Again, vehicle concept team though. So vehicle concepts, this is more like it, like 15 weeks, 16 weeks for a concept is like a medium-ish ship. When you start going over that by any significant amount, it means it's either going to be a larger ship, a more complicated ship, or something we haven't seen before, like an alien ship. And this one is around Alien Week, so I wouldn't be shocked if this was another Xi'an or Banu ship. We're kind of missing a medium Banu ship in the lineup. I actually kind of, when I was bored, came up with a design. I had this idea for a brand new sloop, which would be like a somewhere between a freelancer and a I just wanted to play around with Blender. So something between the size of a freelancer and a constellation, just kind of give something in between a Bandit Defender and the Merchantman, just something kind of blended the two styles. But yeah, I would hope that one day, there it is with the wings folded up, kind of give you a sense for scale. It would have like 2 shops in it as opposed to the whole mess of them. And then obviously I was working on the inside. But anyway, off topic. It would be cool if they had another Banu ship. Then another vehicle concept, 15 weeks, gonna start work pretty soon. 15 weeks, medium-sized ship. It's not unusual. This is one of those they wrapped last year that I just think is super interesting because the only 2 teams that have worked on it is audio and VFX. Took them 20 weeks to make. It's not a concept. The vehicle concept team hasn't worked on it. The narrative team hasn't worked on it. The vehicle content teams haven't worked on it. The only people that have worked on it is VFX and audio. So like a parachute or something like that, some sort of parachute shield or bubble, who the hell knows. 16 weeks. This one's straight to flyable. So this is something small. Think like a bike or something like that. So maybe we're getting another bike or something like the Steve. Would not shock me if it was the RTV, which is kind of the Jeep looking version of the STV. Wouldn't shock me if that was that, because this one's straight to drivable. Easy win. 28 weeks for a vehicle concept. Again, 28 weeks is a fair amount of time. Medium, large ship. 14 weeks for the content team. This is the straight to drivable vehicle that they were talking about in the monthly report. Downstream teams aren't in yet, so they'll stretch out a little bit, but 14 weeks, again, not a long time, so that's not going to be a big vehicle. And then underground facilities. This is one that we're kind of looking forward to. I was sort of surprised this wasn't listed as a 319 asset. It isn't, is it? Yeah, because I want to say at some point they said underground facilities, you might be getting the first one in 319. Maybe I dreamed that. But getting the first shot at one of these, they're huge. They're kind of like underground towns unto themselves. So, I mean, you wouldn't be going in and killing 10 guys. You would basically have to sneak your way in or disguise yourself, which means that might be waiting for underlying attack. Very cool. Vehicle tractor beams. So you remember the SRV is ending around here. You're not getting the SRV until this is in. And this is scheduled out to June. So buyer beware. Yeah. Just what I'm guessing is holding this back, and I mentioned this before, is more than just a tractor beam. I'm thinking that this will actually allow not only moving bigger things and ships, but actually being able to manipulate objects. So like turn them and rotate them and do all that kind of thing, which turn and rotate are synonyms. So I don't know why I used both of those words, but as opposed to just moving things closer and further away from you, you'll actually be able to manipulate them. And I think that that's kind of one of the holdups on this and why it's taken 90 weeks. So it's not just moving a bigger thing. Moving on down, weapon misfire and wear. So over time, your pistols and stuff are going to actually start wearing out, and you're going to have to repair them, or they're going to like misfire and not work at all eventually. And so you'll have to upkeep on those or have somebody fix them all the time. And I assume they're going to start opening up stores a lot, like you land and your ship is repaired. You can bring your gun into one of these gunsmiths and they'll be able to fix your gun for you. Or you can do it yourself and save yourself some money. Who knows how they're going to do that. And gang, that is it for this one. It ended up being a little bit longer than I thought it would, but you know, it's a deep dive. This is the first time that we've had new information on what 319 is going to be, so I kind of wanted to go into it. We'll kind of see what happens in a couple weeks and see how much information they give us, how many things are moving around. And I'll decide then if I really want to go into those changes in depth or just kind of touch on this change, this change, this change. This one's cool, which is what I usually do for my shallow dives. But anyway, you made it through them. Those are the things that for right now, it looks like this is what's coming in the new year's. Those things that I just pointed out, kind of my thoughts on it. Let me know down below if you agree, if you think I missed something. If you think that 319 is going to be a different kind of patch than what I'm thinking. Right now I'm thinking mobility and maybe engineering light. Like we won't be able to turn air on and off, but we might be able to start doing true multi-crew gameplay. Let me know. Let me know what you think. I'd be curious to see what everybody's thinking for what this one's going to be. Anyway, thanks for sitting through that whole thing, and like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. If not, then don't like and subscribe. Give me the finger. I can take it. See me next time.